Dear colleagues, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to open the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly's 15th autumn meeting in this historic city of Skopje. First of all, I would like to thank our hosts for the excellent organization of this meeting, which I note takes place just a few short weeks after the 25th anniversary of your country's declaration of independence, as well as the 15th anniversary of the Ohrid Framework Agreement. It is impressive to see the progress made over the past quarter century of independence in building a multi-ethnic democracy. Therefore, I would very much like to welcome President of Parliament, Mr. Drajko Veljanovski. Mr. President, you have the floor.
Благодаря. Почитувана госпожо председател на парламентарно собрание на ОССЕ, почитувани колеги пратеници, ваши екселенции, членови на дипломатскиот кор, дами и господа, драги пријатели. Ми представува големо задоволство денес да ви посакам добре дојде во Скопје, главниот град на Република Македонија. Од донесувањето на одлуката за формирањето, па до денешната есенска сесија на парламентарното собрание на ОССЕ, изминати се 25 години. Период во кој собранието на ОССЕ со својата работа и ангажман се покажа како еден од основните столбови и значаен инструмент во остварувањето на темелните принципи врз кои е формиран ОССЕ. Во овие 25 години парламентарното собрание го потврди значењето на парламентарната дипломатија во зачувањето на мирот, стабилноста и соработката помеѓу 57 држави членки. Република Македонија е полноправна членка на ОССЕ, а со тоа и на парламентарното собрание. Активно и конструктивно учествуваме во неговата работа, пред се во креирањето на ставови и носењето на најразлични одлуки и документи. Дами и господа, Република Македонија добро ја познава и верувам ја цени позитивната улога и големиот придобив кој ОССЕ преку сите негови организациони форми и тела досега ги има постигнато. Не би сакал да подсетувам што се случуваше пред 25 години во регионот и оттаму сите во регионот научиме дека само преку диалог и градењето на доверба, само преку почитувањето на човековите права и слободи, како и остварувањето на принципите на парламентарната демократија и владењето на правото, можеме да обезбедиме стабилност во нашите држави. На овој начин најдобро се придонесува за стабилноста во регионот и во исто време тоа е темел врз кој се развиваме билатералната и мултилатералната соработка. Република Македонија, токму поради непочитувањето на некои од принципите на ОССЕ, но и на други меѓународни институции, непринципиелноста има осетено на свој грб како голема неправда. Дури поради непочитување на темелните принципи на меѓународното право, бевме на своевиден начин блокирање во остварувањето нашата определба за членството во НАТО, иако ги исполниме сите услови. Истото се случува и со започнувањето на преговорите со Европската унија. Сепак, искрено верувам дека сега навистина, скромно, започнува процесот на диалогот, а со тоа и наградењето на доверба, со што би се надминал овој проблем кој 25 години го имаме со нашиот јужен сосед. Во исто време, сакам посебно да истакнам дека во однос на парламентарната соработка, како во регионот, така и пошироко, секогаш ставаме акцент на зачувањето на мирот и надминувањето на сите оние предизвици кои можат да ја загрозат стабилноста во регионот. Како и на изминатите сесии на парламентарно собрание на ОССЕ, така и на ова која денес започнува. Темите на расправата се актуелните состојби. Зајакнувањето на мерките за градење доверба и добро управување во регионот на ОССЕ е тема која не засега сите нас и како држави и како регион, а во исто време уште еднаш ја покажува јакне улогата на Парламентарното собрание на ОССЕ. Посебно би сакал да истакнам дека на оваа сесија ќе се разговара и за мигрантската криза. Криза која за жал и понатаму останува многу сериозен предизвик, не само за регионот, туку и за Европа. Република Македонија не е крајната дестинација на овие луѓе, но е дел од така наречената Балканска рута, која започнува во Република Турција, завршува во државите од Западна Европа. Откако започна оваа бегалска криза, Република Македонија, вложувајќи максимални напори, како во средствата, така и во човечките ресурси, успеа на овие несретни луѓе да им обезбеди услови за безбеден транзит низ нашата држава. Станува збор за повеќе од 900.000 бегалци. При тоа, не заборавајќи на хуманитарната помош од лекарска нега и се друго што е потребно за да се обезбедат минимално хумани и достоинствени услови кои ги заслужува секој човек. Се надевам дека вашата расправа и заклучоци на ова тема ќе бидат чекор напред во ефективното справување со бегалската криза, која, како што напоменав, не е прашање само на Република Турција, Република Грција или Република Македонија. Туку пред се е европско прашање. Исто така, треба да кажеме отворено дека оваа бегалска криза за државите низ кои бегалците транзитираат, а посебно за државите кои се нивна крајна дестинација, отвора голем број прашања и дилеми од економски, културен, демографски и безбедносен карактер. Во исто време, некои настани во кризните региони, од каде што доаѓаат бегалците, покажува дека бегалската криза нема брзо да заврши. Затоа ни се потребни единствени ставови и заклучоци кои заедно и одговорно ќе ги спроведуваме и остваруваме. Дами и господа, драги пријатели, дозволете ми на крајот да ви посакам успешна работа. Се надевам дека овој работен и краток престој во Скопје и Република Македонија ќе ви помине во една пријатна атмосфера и ќе видите барем мал дел од она што е најкарактеристично за нашата држава и нашите граѓани, а тоа е пред се искреноста и почита кон секој наш гости. Ви благодарам.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your insightful speech. We are really happy to be here, and we all greatly look forward to the evening, the dinner you're hosting tonight. I am pleased now, dear colleagues, to welcome the head of the delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE, Ms. Renata Deskoska. We already had a great pleasure of meeting her yesterday evening in Parliament. Renata, the floor is yours.
Madam President of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, distinguished colleagues parliamentarians, members of the diplomatic corps, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor to welcome you here in the Republic of Macedonia on the occasion of the autumn meeting of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly 2016. This is the first OSCE Parliamentary Assembly event organized by the Assembly of the Republic of Macedonia, but also it is the biggest international parliamentary event even organized in our country. I am particularly happy that this session marks 3 important anniversaries: 25 years of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, 15 years since the first autumn meeting of this assembly, but also 25 years since the independence of the Republic of Macedonia. Over the 25 years of its existence, OSCE Parliamentary Assembly has proven its crucial and indispensable role in providing a forum for dialogue among the parliamentarians from Europe, Asia, and North America, leading election observation missions and strengthening international parliamentary cooperation on political, security, economic, environmental, and human rights issues. Still, after 25 years since its establishment, OSCE Parliamentary Assembly faces serious challenges in the implementation of its values, such as peace, security, human rights, democracy, rule of law, and economic development. In the beginning of the 21st century, the security challenges, the threat of terrorism and economic crisis revealed undemocratic tendencies in some countries that were considered democratic. The refugee crisis confronted us with fear, and the fear is the basic motivator of undemocratic ideas, radical and extremist political movements that can endanger basic values of OSCE. In the name of national interests, some European countries responded to the refugee crisis by forgetting the European solidarity. However, OSCE has played and should continue to play a major role in reaffirming the common values such as human rights and the rule of law. Therefore, in this occasion, I would like to stress that concern for regional security should not be to the detriment of the concern for the quality of democracy and the respect of human rights in the OSCE member states. Human rights are an essential part of what the OSCE is today and are referred to us as its human dimension. Now let me say several words in my mother language, Macedonian. За жал, денес човековите права, особено слободата на изразување, слободните медиуми, но и слободните избори се загрозени во одредени земји во рамките на OSCE. Во времето кога триумфираше идејата за демократијата, кога идејата за демократијата е неспорна на меѓународен план, се изродија режими кои имаат повеќе авторитарни обележја, а се прикажуваат како демократски. Мораме да си признаеме дека демократските институции во дел од земјите членки на OSCE се ослабени. Оптимистична оценка е да се каже дека демократијата е во стагнација. Пореална е оценката дека станува збор за назадување на демократијата. Со кршењето на принципите на слободни и фер избори и со загрозување на основните човекови права, подриени се темелите на демократијата и владењето на правото. Клиентелизмот и корупцијата и неодговорните демократски институции водат до големо незадоволство на граѓаните. Почитувани колеги, парламентарното собрание на OSCE треба отворено и храбро да разговара за проблемите со кои што се соочуваме во денешницата. За Република Македонија, која во изминатиот период се соочува со сериозна политичка, правна и институционална криза, одржувањето на оваа есенска сесија на парламентарното собрание на OSCE е од особено значење за да се вратиме на вистинскиот пат, патот на почитувањето на човековите права, патот на одржување слободни и фер избори и возобновување на демократските принципи на владење. Тука посебно сакам да ја нагласам улогата на парламентарното собрание на OSCE и улогата на ОДИХР во поддршка за одржување на слободни избори и очекуваме тие да имаат активна улога на предстојните предвремени парламентарни избори во Република Македонија, кои треба да се одржат на 11 декември оваа година. Се надевам дека темата на парламентарната конференција на OSCE ќе обезбеди доволна рамка за плодна дискусија за овие предизвици. На крајот, во име на делегацијата на Собранието на Република Македонија во парламентарното собрание на OSCE, би сакала да ви се заблагодарам што ја прифативте нашата покана и што сте дел од овој значаен настан за Република Македонија. Ви благодарам.
Thank you very much for addressing us. Thank you. Dear fellow parliamentarians, dear colleagues, dear friends, I'm honored and pleased to be here in Skopje to meet again with all of you. And I want to express my special thanks to the speaker, Mr. Drajko Veljanovski, and the vice speaker, Ms. Renata Deskoska, for your warm welcome and for hosting us in this beautiful country. This city's autumn meeting is about confidence building. Today and tomorrow, we want to explore and discuss what we as parliamentarians can do to strengthen confidence building measures within the OSCE region. And as we do so, it is important to remember that very often one of the most difficult things for our governments is to take into account the interests of other governments. Our voters put us into office with the expectation that we look out for their interests. But in today's world, a nation's interests are very closely interlinked with those of others, which means cooperation is necessary. Without cooperation, there is no chance to get ahead. No country can ensure, for example, its own security just by its own. Instead, we must promote dialogue and compromise. We must engage with each other and search for common ground. We must widen our perspective and see the world not only from our national point of view, but also through the eyes of our neighbors, partners, and even opponents. This is how we build confidence and ultimately replace the threat of conflict with long-term stability. This is the only way, dear colleagues, how we effectively address issues such as radicalization, terrorism, the challenge of migration and refugees, or even climate change. Unfortunately, we are not there yet. Our collective response to the migration challenge could have been much better. So far, we have not succeeded in reconciling the interests of security and stability with the rights of migrants and refugees for safety and a humane treatment. And therefore, also not with our own high standards, which we consider to be part of our values. So far, we have also failed to address the underlying causes of migrations, issues like poverty, conflict, political repression, or, as mentioned before, climate change. Dear colleagues, these are the issues we must tackle together and address effectively if we hope to contain not only the migration and refugee crisis, but also other dilemmas, other developments that may be on the horizon. Thankfully, we have a model of comprehensive security that can help ensure our future is one of peace and prosperity rather than instability and insecurity. The principles are laid out in the 1975 Helsinki Final Act, the 1990 Charter of Paris, and other landmark OSCE accords provide a blueprint for real cooperation and dialogue. Dear colleagues, we do have these agreements, but if we want them to fully develop their potential, we need greater political will. And greater political will we only get through trust and confidence building. For this, it is essential that we all acknowledge that a European security architecture that doesn't work for all of us does in fact not work for any of us. Dear colleagues, here in Southeast Europe, the OSCE has made a real and tangible difference in the lives of so many people. From promoting peace and security to providing support on legal reform and electoral best practices, from police training to facilitating multi-ethnic dialogue. The list of achievements of the OSCE in this region is long and impressive. This region has shown how much progress can be achieved whenever there is a genuine will to comply with international commitments, while simultaneously making the best use of the OSCE and its unique toolbox, including the Parliamentary Assembly itself. Naturally, some challenges continue to exist and new ones add to the burden. But this is one more reason why we must also live up to our own commitments and renew our collective focus and attention on this region for the well-being for all of us. Dear colleagues and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to discussing these issues and more at the roundtable tomorrow with representatives of all 6 OSCE field missions in the region. Our discussions will focus on, among other things, the development of democratic institutions and human rights in Southeast Europe, and on the invaluable work that the OSCE does on the ground. I regret that the Turkish Minister of Affairs will not be delivering a special address here today due to a last-minute development. I traveled to Ankara in August, exactly 1 month after the coup attempt, together with a delegation of other senior leaders from the OSCE PA and representatives of the OSCE governmental branch. It is one of our basic principles of the OSCE to stay in dialogue even in difficult times, or if you want, especially in difficult times. Dialogue makes it possible to address issues of concern, but also promotes mutual understanding. This was to show our support for Turkish democracy, but at the same time to stress Turkey's international commitments, especially with regards to human rights. I'm confident that by doing so, we started a mutual beneficial process. I thank you all once again for being here, and again to the speaker and the vice speaker for your participation today at the opening of the session. I offer the parliamentary's sincere gratitude to you, our hosts, and especially to the staff of the Parliament, working tirelessly with us for the excellent organization of the meeting. Your warmth and your hospitality make it very enjoyable to do our work. And you know, Mother Teresa has been a member of Skopje. And Mother Teresa, who was born here, she said, "The miracle is not that we do this work, but that we even are happy to do it." Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, as I mentioned, the Foreign Minister of Turkey is not able to come today. In his absence, I've been approached by the head of the delegation of Turkey, to whom I will exceptionally grant the floor to clarify the situation. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Unfortunately, Minister Çavuşoğlu cannot be here today. The visit of OSCE Parliamentary Assembly delegation in August to Turkey was very valuable. This served as a demonstration of Parliamentary Assembly's solidarity with Turkey and support for democracy. It also provided for the on-site assessment of the challenges that Turkish people faced due to failed coup attempt that night and afterwards. It is important to understand the situation clearly. We want our friends and partners to be cautious and informed about the platters of coup attempt. On 15 July, Fethullah Gülen terrorist organization, we say FETÖ, attempted coup. Turkish people from all walks of life set an unprecedented example for the defense of democracy, right, and liberties, even at the expense of their lives. Thanks to this solidarity, the attempt failed, but left behind 241 dead and 2,000 wounded. Turkish state has the right and the duty of take necessary measures to bring those involved to justice and completely eliminate these serious dangers. All measures are taken in accordance with our legislation, respecting the rule of law and human rights and the observance of our international obligations. People are not investigated because of their professions, but because of their links and support to Fethullah terror organization. Being a journalist, an academician, or a judge does not provide exemption from criminal investigation. Just imagine that if there would be an Daesh-led coup attempt in European country, and there would be journalists openly support of attempt, would they be regarded as immune from criminal investigation because of their professions? FETÖ is not only a threat to Turkey, it poses a threat to all of countries they operate. These people are not enemy. These people are just our enemy of democracies. In order to uphold our shared principles and values, we should remain united against the attack on democracy in the OSCE region. We have to make sure that such painful episodes will never repeat in future, not in our country, not in OSCE geography. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We very much regret that we could not have been talking to the foreign minister and ask him questions and get some answers. I think having now Maria Teresa in mind and talking about the work we have to do, so I think this is a good start now. We should start and work. We will have the upcoming sessions in 15 minutes. It will start at 4 o'clock. So thank you very much for coming for the opening. We continue to do our work for the next days, and I wish us all a good success. Thank you.
Distinguished members of Parliament, dear ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I call the first session of the Parliamentary Conference on Strengthening Confidence Building Measures and Good Governance in the OSCE region to order. Dear colleagues, it is a pleasure for me to welcome you this afternoon to the Parliamentary Conference's first session focusing on good governance as a basis for fostering economic development in the OSCE region. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to our hostess, Parliament, and especially its staff, as well as to the International Secretariat for organizing this timely debate. I also thank our distinguished panelists for their participation here. Ladies and gentlemen, economic development should be seen as part of the overall response to the challenges that we face today, including migration, as all of our countries will become more stable and secure by promoting economic development. Yet, we continue to face obstacles to the realization of our common economic potential, and the biggest obstacle we face is arguably not geopolitical but bureaucratic. Good governance based on the rule of law and sound public sector management has a profound effect on our growth. Good governance can be characterized by the following factors. First, transparency. People should be able to follow and understand the decision-making process. This means that they will be able to clearly see how and why the decision made by the government. Second, accountability. Government has an obligation to report, explain, and be answerable for the consequences of decisions it has made on behalf of the community it represents. Third, effectiveness and efficiency. Government should implement decisions and follow processes that make the best use of the available people, resources, and time to ensure the best possible results. This is true that in each and every one of our countries, and none of us here can truly claim that we have met all the obligations or higher standards of our governance. Whether big or small, whether developed or still developing, all of our countries have room for improvement and can learn something from the best practices of each other's. In the Assembly's Tbilisi Declaration, adopted in July, we called for participating states to facilitate trade and economic development with a view to fighting corruption and strengthening good governance while respecting labor, social, and environmental standards. Coming from Azerbaijan, I can tell you about the legal and economic challenges related to the sustainable use of the Caspian Sea. So, the final legal status of the Caspian Sea has not been defined, which prevents full-scale cooperation of coastal states in the use of natural and marine resources of the Caspian Basin. Sustainable development should always play a key factor in our economic decision-making. I remind my distinguished colleagues that we are exactly 1 year into the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This set of 19 global goals, adopted in late September 2015, provides a blueprint for ending poverty and hunger, as well as promoting gender equality and combating climate change, among other aspirations. I invite you all to review these important goals and to keep them in mind as you develop good governance strategies and sound economic policies in your home countries. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, I hope that in this spirit we will have a fruitful and constructive discussions this afternoon. So without further delay, I would like to welcome our speakers today. First, we will hear from Dr. Halil Yurdakul, YIGITGUDEN, Coordinator of OSCE Economic and Environmental Activities. Next, there will be a presentation by Mr. Vladimir Grigorov, Professor at the Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies. Then we will have a debate, and I would like now to introduce Dr. YIGITGUDEN, who has served as coordinator of OSCE Economic and Environmental Activities since February 2013. From 1997 to 2003, he was an undersecretary at the Turkish Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, with responsibility for water and mining policy. Outside of politics, Mr. YIGITGUDEN served as Vice President of the Mining and Chemical-Oriented Group Etibank from 1989 to 1991. He also acted as consultant on issues relating to energy economics, energy efficiency, and Caspian geopolitics. Now, I would like to give the floor, Mr. YIGITGUDEN. Please, you have the floor. You can make your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Distinguished members of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure to address this session on this year's OSCE Parliamentary Assembly autumn meeting devoted to good governance as a basis for fostering economic development in the OSCE region. Indeed, good governance of public and private sectors is an essential component of economic exchange, economic development, and regional cooperation. It contributes to mutual trust, stability, and security among countries. Promoting good governance is a key to stimulate positive business and investment climate, leading to maximization of economic benefits in a globalized economy. But promoting good governance requires the adoption of comprehensive and long-term strategies by the states aimed at creating national frameworks of economic policies, institutions, and legislation, including transparency and predictability of budget-making procedures, as well as transparent and fair public procurement systems. Such measures encourage investment and competition, which in turn lead to economic growth, job creation, and more efficient spending of public resources. This has also been recognized last year in New York when the United Nations General Assembly adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The relevance of good governance has been recognized by dedicating a number of targets under the Sustainable Development Goals. In particular, Target 16.6 calls upon to develop effective, accountable, and transparent institutions at all levels. And the Target 16.A reads as follows: strengthen relevant national institutions, including through international cooperation, for building capacity at all levels to prevent violence and combat terrorism and crime. All these are areas where my office is already active through a number of activities that I will be pleased to report to you. Mr. Chairman, the meeting in the framework of the Economic and Environmental Forum, the Economic and Environmental Dimension Implementation Meeting, and the Economic and Environmental Committee provide ongoing platforms for dialogue among representatives of the participating states, the OSCE field operations, partner organizations, and other key stakeholders on the issues relevant to the OSCE second dimension. As you might be aware, promoting good governance and strengthening economic connectivity are among the main priorities of the 2016 German OSCE chairmanship in the economic and environmental dimension this year. Therefore, this year's forum was dedicated to strengthening stability and security through cooperation and good governance. In this regard, my office, in close cooperation with the German OSCE chairmanship, organized the first preparatory meeting that took place in Vienna in January and the second preparatory meeting that was held in Berlin in May, back-to-back to the Chairmanship Business Conference, Connectivity for Commerce and Investments, and the concluding meeting of the Economic Environmental Forum took place on 14th to 16th of September in Prague. This year's forum process conveyed a clear message. Connectivity, with its good economic governance aspects, is a prerequisite for promoting peace, enhancing cooperation, and ultimately stimulating inclusive economic growth. In addition to the forum cycle, good governance will be the main topic of the Economic and Environmental Dimension implementation meeting that will be held on 17th and 18th of October in Vienna. Let me express my sincere gratitude for the active involvement and contribution of the Parliamentary Assembly in all those meetings. Moreover, several Economic and Environmental Committee meetings were devoted to some aspects of good governance and economic development. In particular, let me mention the thematic Economic Environmental Committee meeting on trade facilitation and economic cooperation that took place on 20th of April and on business climate on 15th of June. In an increasingly interconnected world, good governance requires a participatory, inclusive, and multi-stakeholders approach among governments, civil society, business communities, and academia. Therefore, we have intensively involved representatives of private sector in the economic and environmental dimensions meetings throughout this year. This initiative was well perceived by the participating states, and we intend to keep this practice in the future. Building upon the discussions at the Economic Environmental Forum meetings and the Chairmanship Business Conference, the OSCE German Chairmanship has recently distributed a food for thought paper on a possible Ministerial Council decision on good governance and economic connectivity in the OSCE area to be adopted at the Ministerial Council in Hamburg. A possible Ministerial Council decision would reflect the main areas of this year's work in the economic and environmental dimension and would focus on the interconnections between good governance, connectivity, economic exchange, as well as stability and security. If adopted, this decision that would represent a further important step in strengthening the OSCE work in the second dimension. It is my great hope that participating states would be able to find consensus in these important areas. My office stands ready to facilitate this process. I would also like to underline that the incoming Austrian chairmanship will also attach great importance to the issues of good governance and will continue in 2017 with the connectivity agenda of the German OSCE chairmanship. The next year's forum cycle will indeed focus on greening the economy and building partnerships for security in the OSCE region, and will address inter alia business partnerships, good governance for sustainable growth and security, as well as economic participation as the main priorities in the economic and environmental dimension. Mr. Chairman, promoting good governance through combating corruption, money laundering, and the financing of terrorism are among the key activities of my office. let me now briefly outline some of these activities implemented this year in this field. This year, my office has published, after 3 years of comprehensive work, the OSCE Handbook on Combating Corruption, which it plans to use for training and capacity building purposes. This is an excellent tool for practitioners throughout the OSCE area for improving the effectiveness of their efforts to strengthen good governance. A 2-year project on fostering a participatory approach towards preventing corruption in Central Asia has been developed by my office. Once it raises the necessary funds, the project, through a series of multi-stakeholder trainings and capacity building activities, is expected to enhance existing national corruption prevention agendas, tools, and mechanisms. We have recently developed a project on strengthening the anti-corruption capacity of Mongolia. Once it receives funding, the project will provide the independent authority against corruption of Mongolia and other relevant bodies and agencies, including the Parliament of Mongolia, with targeted technical assistance needed to develop its capacities to further strengthen anti-corruption legislation and introduce and implement more effective anti-corruption policy tools and instruments. My office also continues its cooperation with the OECD Anti-Corruption Network for Eastern Europe and Central Asia. In this regard, in May of this year, we organized with the OSCE Center in Bishkek, in the framework of the OECD Anti-Corruption Network, a regional expert seminar on corruption prevention with a particular focus on the extractive industry and education sector. Beginning of this month, on 5th and 6th of September, my office, in cooperation with the Office for Prevention and Fight Against Money Laundering of the Republic of Moldova, the EU high-level advisor in the field of anti-money laundering in the Republic of Moldova, and the UN ODC, organized a meeting on fostering cooperation in combating corruption and money laundering. The meeting participants conducted a gap analysis on current capabilities and needs of financial intelligence units aimed at detecting, investigating, and disrupting money laundering threats associated with offshore zones. This year, my office has launched a project on money and politics, together with ODIHR and field operations in the Southeast Europe. Scoping missions were conducted to 5 mission areas in the first half of 2016 to assess how authorities are dealing with political party financing, public officials' assets and income disclosure, public procurement, and money laundering. Following these data-gathering visits, a final anti-corruption expert meeting, lessons from Southeast Europe, that will take place in Vienna on 24th and 25th of October, will discuss threats, trends, and regional best practices to develop a list of policy recommendations and technical assistance requests. Before concluding, I would like to spend a few moments on one of the main issues that we are currently addressing within different fora of the OSCE, namely migration, and the need for a coherent and long-term response by the international community besides the current refugees flow. Indeed, there is a high urgency in identifying best ways to deal with the current flows of persons. There is a need to elaborate long-term strategies. During the debates we have had throughout this year, there has been a growing consensus among participating states that there is a strong need to work together to make migration a key factor to economic development and growth. In particular, it has been acknowledged that one needs to address dysfunctional labor migration policies that do not allow the most suitable allocation of human resources and skills where they are needed. This includes stepping up efforts to improving policy cohesion between migration management, economic development, and environmental policies, encouraging legal migration and combating illegal migration by balancing facilitation and prevention measures, understanding the demand and supply of labor markets, creating conditions for improved economic development and cooperation, facilitating integration of migrants in host societies and their reintegration on return, and improving their protection. Let me mention here one of the main events my office has organized in June this year, the expert meeting towards an enhanced long-term OSCE approach to migration governance. The event brought together over 80 participants from international and regional organizations, the International Center for Migration Policy Development, the International Labour Organization, the International Organization for Migration, the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, OSCE executive structures, national and international specialists in the field of migration governance, academia and civil society, to discuss how migration can be a resource for public institutions, the private sector, local communities, and migrants themselves. The meeting also looked at possible future priority areas of action for my office. The discussions have been summarized in a concise key findings document that had represented the OSCE contribution to the informal working group on migration in view of the special PC on migration and refugee flows held on 20th of July. Let me also mention that we are planning a follow-up event in December to look at the contribution of the OSCE towards a global compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration to be adopted in 2018. All these activities demonstrate how the OSCE continues to offer a platform for comprehensive dialogue among the representatives of participating states, international and regional organizations, private sector, civil society, academia, and other stakeholders to search for new opportunities and enhance cooperation through the exchange of best practices and experiences. I would like to emphasize that my office stands ready to support the OSCE participating states in strengthening good governance through combating corruption, money laundering, and the finance of terrorism, through transport and trade facilitation, and through a better migration management. I strongly believe that our efforts can be effective only by matching human and financial resources as well as a strong political will. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. YIGITGUDEN, for your very interesting presentation.